You've been told that when someone starts to distance themselves, the answer is to move closer, to send another message, to ask more questions, and to prove how much you care. But sometimes that is exactly what creates even more distance. Here is what many people misunderstand. An avoidant person is not damaged beyond repair. They are not emotionless. They are not incapable of love. They can absolutely be the person who reaches out first, sends a message just because they thought about you, calls because they want to hear your voice, and chooses to be present consistently. But it usually does not happen when they feel chased, pressured, or like someone is trying to hold on to them. It happens when they experience a connection that feels different, a connection where they feel both wanted and free. Today, you are going to understand why avoidant people often move toward the person who does not constantly seek their validation, and how you can create that kind of presence without pretending, manipulating, or playing emotional games. Stay until the end, because the final part will reveal the biggest mistake most people make with avoidant partners and what actually creates a deeper bond. If this message connects with you, comment magnetize below because it shows that you want more conversations like this. And remember to subscribe because the next videos in this series will help you understand relationships, emotions, and yourself on a much deeper level. Now let's look at what is really happening inside the mind of someone with avoidant patterns. Once you understand this, their actions begin to make much more sense. Many avoidant people learned something very early in life. They learned that depending on others could lead to disappointment. Not because someone directly explained this to them, but because their experiences repeatedly showed them that reaching for emotional support could feel unsafe. Maybe their emotions were ignored. Maybe they were expected to handle everything alone. Maybe they were made to feel that needing comfort was a weakness. Over time, they developed a protective system, a strong emotional barrier built to keep them safe from the possibility of being hurt. And that barrier can become so familiar that they mistake it for who they are. But here is the important part. That wall does not mean they do not desire love. In many cases, it means they desire it deeply, but struggle to fully trust it. This creates a confusing pattern. They move closer when they feel connected, they begin to open up, they start feeling something meaningful, and then suddenly they create distance. From the outside, it can look like rejection, but internally it can be a response to feeling vulnerable. It is not always because they do not care. Sometimes it happens because they care more than they expected, and that level of closeness feels overwhelming. When you constantly chase someone with avoidant tendencies, something unexpected can happen. You may think you are showing love, but they may experience it as pressure. Every extra message after they become quiet, every attempt to get immediate reassurance, every moment where you ask if something is wrong. These actions often come from a place of fear and wanting connection, but to someone who already fears emotional dependence, it can reinforce the idea that closeness means losing space. It can remind them of the very thing they have been protecting themselves from. This does not mean you should become cold or pretend you do not care. It does not mean you should disappear to make someone miss you. Real connection is not created through strategies or emotional tricks. The shift happens when you stop abandoning yourself while trying to keep someone else close. When you become someone who can offer warmth without desperation, care without fear, and love without losing your own identity. That kind of energy feels different because it creates safety instead of pressure. An avoidant person may be used to people either chasing them or completely walking away. What they often do not experience is someone who can genuinely care while still standing firmly in their own life. Someone who says, "I enjoy being connected with you, but I am still whole on my own." That emotional balance can create curiosity because it feels stable, it feels peaceful, it feels like a relationship where both people can breathe. And that is often where avoidant individuals begin to lower their defenses, not because they were manipulated into it, but because they finally experience a connection that does not feel like a threat. Stay with me, because understanding this difference can completely change the way you approach love and emotional attachment. Or asking yourself, Did I do something wrong? Every time you respond from fear, you may unintentionally strengthen the belief that emotional closeness comes with pressure and responsibility. And when an avoidant person feels overwhelmed, they often create more distance, not always because they want to hurt you, but because pulling away feels like the safest way for them to handle emotions they do not know how to process. But now, here is the part that completely changes the way you see this situation. When you stop chasing, when you stop making their attention the center of your world, when your energy shifts and you begin focusing on yourself again, something inside them can start to change. A thought appears, a question forms. Where did they go? Why does their presence feel different now? That moment of curiosity is often where awareness begins. This is not about controlling someone. It is not about pretending you do not care. It is about understanding emotional patterns and choosing a healthier way to show up. Because the truth is, you cannot create deeper love by shrinking yourself, constantly proving your worth, or making yourself endlessly available. You become more valuable when you recognize your own value first. You become more attractive when you stop abandoning yourself just to be chosen by someone else. And that is the transformation we are talking about today. The first thing you need to understand is something many people get completely wrong. Your availability has value, but many people give it away without realizing how powerful it actually is. Think about anything that is always present. Over time, people can stop noticing it. They stop appreciating it the same way, not because they are cruel or careless, but because the human mind naturally pays more attention to things that feel meaningful and not guaranteed. We often recognize value when we understand something is not unlimited. And for a long time, you may have been giving someone unlimited access to your attention. You respond instantly. You rearrange your plans. You are always ready whenever they need you. You make yourself easy to reach at every moment. And while this comes from kindness and genuine care, someone with avoidant tendencies may interpret constant availability differently. They may feel pressure instead of comfort. They may feel like they are responsible for your emotional state. And when that feeling becomes too heavy, their instinct may be to create distance. But when you become someone who has a full life, someone who has passions, goals, friendships, and personal moments that exist beyond the relationship, everything begins to shift. When you take a little time to respond because you are genuinely busy living, not because you are trying to create a reaction, the entire dynamic changes. When you become someone who is not always waiting, not always watching, and not always placing your life on pause, your presence starts to feel different. The goal is never to become unavailable. The goal is to become fulfilled, to build a life so meaningful that your attention becomes something special because it comes from choice, not from need. That authentic change in your behavior is what can create a healthier connection. So what does this actually look like in real life? It means you do not have to answer every message within seconds. Not because you want to send a signal, but because you are simply living your own life. If they disappear for a few days and suddenly return late at night, you do not have to immediately drop everything. You can respond when it feels right for you, not as punishment, not as a strategy, but because your time matters too, your emotions matter too, your life matters too. Here is something that may feel difficult at first, but is incredibly important. When an avoidant person becomes distant, your first instinct may be to fill the empty space. You want to send another message. You want to ask if everything is okay. You want reassurance that the connection is still there. But sometimes allowing space is more powerful than trying to force closeness. When you stop rushing to remove every moment of silence, that silence gives both people room to reflect. They begin to experience the difference between your presence and your absence. And sometimes that realization creates a deeper awareness than any conversation could. Now, there is another important piece that many people misunderstand. The answer is not to become cold. The answer is not to copy their distance and create your own emotional wall. Two people protecting themselves from each other does not create intimacy. It only creates two people standing far apart while hoping to feel close. The real change comes from learning how to be fully present while still remaining connected to yourself. When you are with them, truly be there. Listen deeply, enjoy the conversation, laugh, share your thoughts. Create moments where they feel seen and understood. Give genuine attention when you choose to give it. But when that moment ends, continue living your own life. Do not sit by the phone waiting for the next message. Do not measure your worth by their response time. Do not disappear into their world and forget your own. This balance is what creates a unique emotional experience. Deep connection with breathing room, warmth without pressure, care without losing yourself. You stop becoming someone they feel the need to escape from, and you become someone they feel drawn toward. Now, let's talk about something even deeper about avoidant attraction, because this is where many people finally understand what has been happening. Avoidant individuals often desire emotional safety, but not the kind of safety created by someone who constantly sacrifices themselves. That type of connection can feel overwhelming because it carries hidden pressure. The safety they truly respond to is the kind that communicates, I care about you, but I also care about myself. I want you in my life, but I am not losing myself to keep you there. And that kind of energy creates something powerful. It creates a connection where love feels like a choice, not a demand. I am not leaving, but I also do not need you to complete me. That is the kind of emotional safety that creates a different experience. It comes from someone who is grounded within themselves, someone who does not lose control when a message is unanswered, someone who does not turn every moment of space into a disaster. When you truly become that person, not as an act, not as a strategy, but because you have built that inner stability for yourself, an avoidant person can begin to feel calmer around you. And when someone with avoidant patterns feels emotionally safe, they finally have the ability to open up instead of protecting themselves. So how do you become that person? It begins with doing the personal work that many people unknowingly expect a relationship to do for them. Many people enter relationships hoping another person will repair their insecurities, remove their doubts, and constantly reassure them that they are enough. But someone with avoidant tendencies can often sense that emotional weight very quickly. And when they already struggle with their own feelings, carrying someone else's emotional world can feel overwhelming. But when you enter a relationship as a whole person, someone who knows who they are, someone with their own interests, friendships, goals, and happiness that does not depend on another person's attention, you become the strongest version of yourself. And this is not an exaggeration. This is often the difference between someone an avoidant continues to feel connected to and someone they slowly distance themselves from. Stay with me, because the next part reveals one of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to create a stronger bond with someone who pulls away. The third important principle is communication, and this is where many people misunderstand what actually works. A lot of people believe the only way to reach an avoidant person is through intense emotional conversations. They think they need to explain every feeling, define every moment, and ask questions like, where is this relationship going? Or, why do I feel like you are becoming distant? And there is nothing wrong with honest communication. It is necessary in healthy relationships. But timing and approach matter deeply when someone's natural response to emotional pressure is shutting down. When an avoidant person feels emotionally cornered, their protective system can activate. They may become quiet, distant, or unavailable, not because they do not care, but because they feel overwhelmed and do not know how to handle the intensity. And every time that cycle repeats, the distance can become stronger. Instead, a different approach can create a better environment. Focus on connection that feels natural. When you reach out, let it come from genuine interest, not anxiety. Share something funny that happened during your day. Ask about something they enjoy. Send something that reminds them of a shared experience. Create conversations that feel enjoyable instead of conversations that feel like emotional examinations. This does not mean pretending or hiding your feelings. It means understanding that with avoidant patterns, closeness often develops through moments of comfort. It happens when they are laughing, relaxed, curious, and enjoying your presence without feeling like they are being pushed into a difficult emotional situation. Those simple moments often create the foundation for deeper trust. The strongest bonds are not always built during heavy conversations. Sometimes they are built through hundreds of small moments where two people feel safe being themselves. Now, when you begin applying these changes and you notice small differences, maybe they start reaching out more, maybe conversations become longer, maybe they seem warmer than before. This is where many people make a mistake. They become excited and move too quickly. They see a small opening and immediately rush forward. They ask for commitment. They demand clarity. They bring up every feeling they have been holding inside. And suddenly the pressure returns. The connection that was slowly growing starts feeling heavy again. Remember this simple rule. When they move closer, meet them there, but do not rush ahead of them. If they communicate more, you can communicate more. If they share something personal, you can share something personal too. But do not suddenly release months of emotions in one conversation. Do not send the long message you have been writing privately for weeks. Allow trust to grow naturally. Let the relationship develop step by step. Because when an avoidant person begins reaching out more, they are often quietly testing whether closeness feels safe. They are observing what happens when they move toward you. Do you immediately grab onto them because you are afraid they will leave? Or can you remain calm and allow the connection to develop naturally? The person who stays emotionally steady creates the safest environment, and that emotional balance is what changes the entire dynamic. There is another piece of this that many people rarely discuss, but it may be one of the most important parts. Your emotional state affects the relationship. When you are constantly worried about where you stand, when your mind is always searching for signs that they are leaving, when your confidence rises and falls depending on whether they respond, that energy often appears without you realizing it. It shows up in the way you text. It appears in how quickly you reply. It can be heard in your voice during a conversation. It can even appear in the way you try to extend a call because you are afraid of losing the connection. People with avoidant patterns are often very sensitive to emotional tension because they learned early to notice changes in the emotional environment around them. When they sense anxiety, fear, or pressure, their instinct may be to create distance. But when your emotional state becomes genuinely calm, everything changes. When you can honestly say, I like this person, I want this connection, I hope it grows, but I know I will still be okay if it does not. That creates a completely different energy. This is not about pretending you do not care. It is about becoming strong enough that your entire happiness is not controlled by another person's behavior. That kind of inner security is powerful. It is attractive because it feels peaceful. Building that security means investing in your own life, strengthening your friendships, following your goals, exploring your passions, getting support when you need it, creating a world that feels meaningful even when someone else is uncertain. When you build that kind of life, you do not just become more appealing to an avoidant person, you become more connected to yourself, and that is the foundation of every healthy relationship. Now let's talk about what happens when an avoidant person finally reaches out, because your response in those moments matters more than most people realize. When they send a message after being distant, when they call after some silence, when they make an effort to reconnect, avoid turning that moment into a confrontation. Do not respond with, "Oh, so you finally remembered me." Do not make them feel like every attempt to connect comes with a punishment. Instead, meet the moment with warmth. Be present with what they are offering now. Allow the conversation to be simple and enjoyable. What this communicates is powerful. It shows them that being close to you does not come with emotional debt. It shows them that connection with you can feel peaceful instead of stressful. Over time, they begin associating your presence with comfort, acceptance, and emotional safety, and that is often what people with avoidant patterns deeply desire, even if they struggle to express it. They want someone who makes closeness feel natural, someone who makes intimacy feel like a choice, not an obligation, someone who makes them feel like they can breathe. But there is something important you must remember. Not every avoidant person is ready to become the partner you need. Some people grow, some people learn how to communicate better and create healthier relationships. But others may remain stuck in patterns that prevent them from showing up fully. Your responsibility is not to become someone's emotional repair system. Your responsibility is to protect your own value and recognize whether someone is truly moving toward you or simply enjoying your attention without giving anything meaningful back. The deepest strength comes from knowing the difference. If someone is not meeting you halfway, you must respect yourself enough to choose your own peace. Because one of the most powerful things you can do in any relationship is be genuinely okay with walking away, not as a trick, not to create fear, not to make someone chase you, but because you truly know that your life has value with or without that person. That kind of confidence changes everything. It communicates that your love is available, but your self-respect is not negotiable. And when someone understands that you will not wait endlessly, they are faced with a choice. They can step forward and build something real, or they can let the opportunity pass. The people who are truly capable of growth are the ones who recognize the value of someone who knows their worth. Now let's talk about texting, because this is where many people repeat the same mistakes. The first mistake is overextending conversations because they are afraid the connection will disappear. You keep adding messages, you keep searching for another topic, you keep trying to maintain the attention, but the goal is not to hold someone's attention forever. The goal is to create conversations that feel good and leave a positive impression. Sometimes the strongest moment to end a conversation is when the energy is still high, when you are both laughing, when the connection feels natural, when there is still something left to look forward to. You do not have to force every interaction until there is nothing left to say. Leaving a conversation with warmth and positive energy creates space for the next one. It allows curiosity to grow. And sometimes that small space is where desire and appreciation begin to develop. You end the conversation while the feeling is still positive, while there is still warmth, curiosity, and connection. And that is often what creates the desire to come back. Think about your favorite series. Does an episode usually end when nothing interesting is happening? No, it ends at the exact moment that makes you want to know what happens next. That is the same idea you can apply to your conversations. You are not trying to keep someone engaged every second of the day. You are creating moments that feel meaningful enough that they naturally want to experience them again. When you send a message, make that message something they enjoy receiving. It does not need to be long. It does not need to be serious. It does not need to carry emotional pressure. Sometimes the most powerful messages are simple, playful, thoughtful, and connected to something real. The message that creates a response is usually not the one that says, "Hey, you have been quiet. Is everything okay?" The message that creates connection is the one that brings positive energy and reminds them that talking to you feels good. Stop sending messages that force them into explanations. Questions like, "Why didn't you contact me? Are you still interested?" Or "What are we?" can sometimes activate their instinct to protect themselves. Instead, create conversations that feel easy. Ask things that spark curiosity. Share things that make them smile. Give them a reason to enjoy interacting with you. The goal is not to make communication a responsibility. The goal is to make it something they look forward to. Here is something difficult but important to understand. Sometimes the reason an avoidant person is not reaching out consistently is because, without realizing it, you may have placed yourself in the position of needing their attention to feel secure. And no person, whether avoidant or not, wants to feel like they are responsible for someone else's emotional stability. When you change that dynamic, everything begins to feel lighter. When you stop waiting for their messages to determine your mood and start simply appreciating the moments when they choose to connect, the entire relationship changes. They no longer feel like every conversation comes with pressure. They no longer feel like every message creates an expectation they have to fulfill. They no longer feel like showing up means making promises they are afraid they cannot keep. And when that emotional weight disappears, many people naturally become more open because connection starts feeling like a choice instead of an obligation. But now we need to talk about something even deeper, something underneath the surface that may explain why this situation affects you so strongly. And I want you to really think about this. Sometimes we are drawn to people because of their distance. Sometimes the uncertainty, the waiting, and the effort required to receive attention can create a feeling that we mistake for deep love. The emotional highs and lows can feel intense, familiar, and strangely powerful, even when they are exhausting. And often, that pattern began long before this relationship. It may come from earlier experiences where love felt inconsistent, where attention had to be earned, or where emotional availability was not always guaranteed. This does not mean something is wrong with you. It means you are human, and humans often repeat emotional patterns until they become aware of them. The moment you recognize the pattern, you gain the ability to choose differently. You can say, I understand why this dynamic feels familiar, but I also want a connection where love feels steady, where someone chooses me openly, where emotional presence is normal. And you can work toward making consistency feel attractive instead of only feeling drawn toward uncertainty. That is the deeper transformation. It does not only change one relationship, it changes every relationship you build after this.